All right, now we're up to topic 1.4. This is, again, APUSH History Period 1 Review. And our topic today is going to be Columbian Exchange, Spanish Exploration, and Conquest. So let's get into this topic. Our first learning objective states that we need to explain the cause of the Columbian Exchange and its effect on Europe and the Americas during the period after 1492. Of course, 1492 being the arrival of Christopher Columbus. A couple of historical developments we're going to look at with this time period. Number one, the Columbian Exchange brought new crops to Europe from the Americas, stimulating European population growth and new sources of mineral wealth, which facilitated the European shift from feudalism to capitalism. So on our map, we've got a nice view of some of the key voyages of our early explorers, people like Columbus, of course, Cortez, Coronado, and so forth. You can see the original Portuguese exploration going around over to India, which, if we talked about on our last section, the Portuguese looking around Africa to Asia eventually prompts us to go west. Again, the goal is not to get North America. They don't know that even exists. The goal is, of course, to get around the other side to East Asia, where all these goods are located. Now, before we get too far into this topic, we do need to take a brief moment to look at something called the Treaty of Tordesillas. This is an agreement made by the Spanish and the Portuguese, something facilitated by the Pope over here in Rome. And the Treaty of Tordesillas basically divides the New World between Portuguese claims and the Spanish claims. The Spanish will take what's west of this line, Portuguese what's east of that line. Now, when we're looking at the Columbian Exchange, we're of course talking about this huge transformation that's going to take place, not just in the New World, which is the Americas, but also the Old World, which would be Europe, Asia, and Africa. And it's this just mass movement of goods and people and products and animals and plants, and of course also diseases. And we'll talk more about the diseases here in just a bit. It's named for Christopher Columbus because his voyage is the first to really get Europeans going over in the modern age anyways, to the New World, to really bring stuff from Europe and Africa and Asia, and then taking stuff back with them. And this is going to revolutionize the world's diet, the type of foods people eat, and you can see some of the crops here that Europeans had never seen before prior to the Columbian Exchange, and of course these are things that the people of the Americas had never seen from the Old World. Now, two key things we want to talk about. This is going to have a big effect going forward. Will be the arrival of the horse. The Europeans are going to bring this over here. The people in the Americas had never seen such a thing. And then we have sugarcane being brought over from the Old World to be grown in the New World. Now, this Columbian Exchange has a lot of big effects on both sides of the Atlantic. We're going to see new crops arriving in Europe, which is going to help stimulate a vast European population growth that's going to take place during this time period and continue for the next several centuries. And with all of that wealth coming in from the Americas, it's going to lead to some pretty big economic and political and social changes back in Europe as well. In general, we're going to see a shift away from feudalism, something you've learned about way back in your studies of the Middle Ages, with this very top-down hierarchy here, to something that we're going to see with capitalism. Now, of course, this is not something that's going to just immediately go from A to B overnight. It's a slow, gradual transition in stages, but eventually it'll stimulate sort of proto-capitalism, we might call it. And that wealth we were talking about just a second ago, you can see we've got silver mining, gold mining, down here in the South America specifically, and also modern-day Mexico, and even some in the Caribbean. So the Spanish are going to come over here to settle, and then all these empires are going to be kind of pushed out of the way to make room for plantations and mines, and all that wealth is going to flow over here to Asia to buy stuff, but also back to Europe. All right, our next big development states that improvements in maritime technology, that means ships, and more organized methods for conducting international trade, such as joint stock companies, helped drive changes to economies in Europe and the Americas. We've already looked at the caravel, this new type of ship that's going to allow Europeans, originally Portuguese and Spanish, to go longer distances than ever, which allows them to really start to crisscross the globe in a way that had never been done before in human history. Now, the joint stock company that was mentioned in the historical development is something we're going to look more at with the English later. But as a quick review, a joint stock company is kind of similar to a modern-day corporation in that you have lots of investors who pool their money together to form one company. Each investor is only liable for their initial investment. So if the company goes belly up, that is to say it goes out of business, they are only responsible for the original investment. They're not on the hook for everything that the company does. So this allows Europeans to pool resources quickly, raise lots of money, which of course is going to require lots of money to build these colonies overseas. Our next historical development says Spanish exploration and conquest of the Americas were accompanied and furthered by widespread deadly epidemics that devastated native populations and by the introduction of crops and animals not found in the Americas. Well, we've already covered, I think, pretty well the crops and the animals from the Columbian Exchange. But we do need to look a little bit more at those epidemics. And this is obviously a very timely topic if you're in 2020 like I am right now. So what we're going to see are those Spanish conquerors or conquistadors arriving from Europe, arriving in North America, South America, also the Caribbean. And these are some of the earliest people coming over in the first half of the 1500s. Again, you can see some names here: De Soto, Coronado, Cortez, and so forth. And with them arrives lots and lots of diseases that the native population of the Americas really had no resistance to, and they're going to die in enormous numbers. Now, this was not intentional by the Europeans, of course. They don't know that they're bringing this over, at least initially anyways, but the effects, nonetheless, are drastic. And in particular, smallpox is going to be quite a killer. It's going to spread rapidly among the natives, who have no real knowledge of this, no immunity to it. And the disease will often spread along trade routes. So the disease often jumps ahead of the conquerors, and sometimes conquerors will arrive in these areas that have been basically depopulated, or at least heavily weakened, before the Europeans ever set foot. So disease will help the Europeans in their conquest of the Americas. So that was a quick review of topic 1.4, the Columbian Exchange, Spanish conquest, and exploration.